watching BiTV European Service, and today I am with Thomas Balashev, who is Monta Capital's founder. Hello, Thomas.
Hello, Inez. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you for joining us. So tell me, Thomas, there's been quite a lot going on in the UK recently between the global pandemic and, of course, Brexit. How is this impacting the French investors who are looking to come to the UK to invest?
So the first obvious difficulty is the freedom of movement. It's difficult for any investor and even our neighbours in France to come into London and the rest of the UK freely. So that does impact the attitude of investors looking into the UK. As you know from your time in London, there's a huge French community in London. There's a lot of investment opportunities in prime central London. So it makes sense for a country so close to us to have a huge amount of interest in the real estate investment that goes on here. But travel has made that difficult. The second thing is the attitudes of perhaps France towards the UK. The way that we left Europe wasn't hugely well received in France. It has its difficulties and its challenges. That is a knock-on effect from us leaving the European Union. So I think in addition to just general difficulties in getting into the UK, I think the attitude towards the UK has perhaps changed from France. And I think what we want to really stress as a brand that are open to business from all the types of investors from around the world is that if you put aside any political differences or opinions on a political landscape and you look objectively at real estate, the UK has a huge opportunity, and I'm very bullish on the outcome over the next 10 years within UK real estate. So there's a huge plethora of opportunity for a French investor to come in and really make a huge return in this country.
And talking about opportunities on the UK's market, how is it going there?
So I predicted successfully last year that property prices would in fact rise through the course of 2020, but we're now coming into a time where the financial stimulus from the government through our employment furlough scheme will end shortly, and also there is a surcharge of additional stamp duty to pay for foreign investors. So that's going to create some difficulties, but if people can see past that, I think there's a huge opportunity in the UK for distressed assets. Our real strategy as a business is looking at that marketplace, distressed assets. Now, distressed doesn't always mean derelict, it doesn't mean dilapidated, it can sometimes just mean undervalued, and it's about having a different perspective on that type of real estate to innovate it. There's been a lot of talk internally at the business about creating a touchless experience in the developments that we build, something that we can now learn from the pandemic and really ensure our investors against risks of another pandemic, perhaps more deadly, coming in the future, is by almost pandemic proofing our real estate decisions. So that's something that we're looking at the UK in. In terms of other opportunities, commercial and retail has taken a huge effect. We've got sort of 3 or 4 major cities in the UK: Manchester, Liverpool, London, possibly Glasgow or Edinburgh in the north and Scotland. And other than that, we've got kind of regional sized towns. Their high streets, their retail, their footfall has been severely affected. So one thing I think, and that's not just the case in the UK, that's all over, but one of the things that I think smart real estate investors have to consider is repurposing our high streets, is changing the way that we develop it, perhaps creating an opportunity for residential. There's still a huge supply and demand equation in the UK. We still need to build more homes, but I think we can now think outside the box and use some existing commercial and retail spaces to create really unique and fun places to live.
Right, and I have one last question. So talking about Monta Capitals, in a previous interview, you told me you were coming to France. How is your project going?
So when we first spoke, we had the biggest eyes in the world. We were very excited to take over the real estate market. Unfortunately, our timing of our launch made things difficult, and there was a series of different events outside of our control affected with the pandemic that made it difficult for us to travel easily. I did visit France just before we were banned as UK residents coming, so I managed to get into Paris in the south of France earlier in the summer. Met with some really great developers, some really interesting investors. So there are a few things in the pipeline that we have specifically looking at the French market primarily in Paris. And our strategy for Paris is quite similar with our strategy for London. So we feel those two markets are quite similar. We understand the London market really well. We are still planning to move into France and look at lending in the future, because we know that the lending market in France is extremely underdeveloped when compared to the UK. But the markets are quite similar in many respects. So there's a lot that we can learn from what's happening in a really successful way in the UK and kind of translate that through to the French markets. But I think, unfortunately, with the way that things have gone over the last year, we're probably still another 12 months, I think, from really entering France in a big way.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you all for watching.